Page 45, calendar number 481, substitute for House Bill number 5003, an act concerning workforce development and working conditions in the state. There are several amendments.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We are just coming back after the conclusion of the vote that we had on my amendment that would have made changes to Section 7 regarding the portal-to-portal coverage that is referenced regarding workers' compensation coverage for members of the Public Works Department. And I just want to be very clear that, I support the concept here. And I believe that folks should have access to workers' comp, and people that work for the Public Works Department, particularly when you're talking about snowplow drivers and people that might get called in dangerous weather where other people are actually excused from work, are even more deserving than anyone. So it's not about whether or not they're deserving. It's about when they're deserving and whether or not we're drafting a public policy that is sensible. And my frustration on this one is I really don't think that too many people disagree with my concern about the way this is drafted and what it should be written as. And yet, the majority, I don't think, is making a cogent or even attempting an argument to suggest I'm wrong. They're just saying, no, we like it the way it is, and we're going to do it that way. It doesn't matter when this Republican member of the minority points out an imperfection. We'll just roll through it. And if we decide maybe later to fix it, we might. As a reminder, the concern is that this broadly defines work comp to be available simply when an employee is subject to emergency calls. It doesn't even require them to be actually responding to one. And I'd just like to ask the good chairman through you, Madam President, is there another example where we provide such broad workers' compensation protection for any other class of employee in the state? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This portal-to-portal coverage is provided to police officers and firefighters and to employees of the Department of Correction and also for telecommunicators. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
I'm sorry, Madam President, I got called away for a moment, but I did not hear the answer from the proponent, and I am sincerely apologetic because I know I made an issue of this earlier, but it could not be helped in my case. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President. This section of the bill is also pertains to, there's underlying statute, and the underlying statute, this type of coverage is portal-to-portal coverage is provided to police officers and firefighters, departments of correction employees, and telecommunicators. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the gentlelady's response, and all I would suggest is that going forward, when we are crafting this expansive level of protection for workers' comp, that we keep in mind the very clear meaning of the placement of the commas and the uses of the words and or to signify when coverage is really appropriate and when it is not. And while I do firmly believe that Public Works Department employees deserve every benefit that is already afforded to other classes of employees in the state of Connecticut, I do believe that in every case, simply being on call is not enough. You should be on call and be being called in for that coverage to go into effect. But rather than beat a dead horse, I will simply move on to Section 8, which I believe is specific to teacher terminations. Through you, Madam President, can I ask the good chairman to describe what is happening in Section 8? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 8 modifies existing statute to provide that in the case of tenured teachers who are terminated, they would have access to a hearing officer whose decision, after taking all the evidence, would be final and binding on the parties. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Okay, so this is strengthening the protections for teachers if they are subject to termination. And there's essentially two pieces to this, if I'm correct. The second one, very clear to me, which is that we're going to leave this decision no longer up to the local school board, but we are going to put it in the hands of a arbitrator. And the first question I guess I would ask for clarification purposes to understand if this reference to just cause would mean that there are any other circumstances where a teacher might be subject more or less to termination before or after this bill is passed. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I would ask the good senator to point to the line which he's referencing.
Thank you, and Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is Section 8, which I believe the language that is substantive begins on line 606, where there is some new underlined language which refers to the standard of review for reasons of termination. And the final section has to do with the different classifications of teachers, effectively discriminating between those with tenure and without. But what I'm trying to understand is, are we strengthening protections for teachers here with regard to what they can or cannot be terminated for? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I was asking that because I heard the good senator ask about just cause, and I didn't see those words in here. But if you're asking about what this does, it provides for a neutral hearing officer to render a decision that is binding on the parties. The reasons that are listed in existing statute for a teacher to be terminated have not been changed. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I appreciate that clarification. As I pointed out numerous times today, this is a bill that contains 75 sections, many of which were individual bills. And we had a just cause protections for teachers bill in the Labor Committee, and I fully expected that this language in Section 8 included the entirety of that bill, and maybe it doesn't. Maybe it is only the final section that was pre-existing has made it into this document. And is that correct, through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Like so many other bills, there have been changes made to the language that was received a joint favorable recommendation out of the committee. So this language has changed since we discussed it in committee. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Color me shocked that we've got new language all of a sudden that we didn't see before, that we're debating in front of the few visitors that we have, that would ultimately change the policy for the state of Connecticut. And there's just not enough participation for people to really flesh this out. It did not go through a hearing in the manner that we are seeing it. So it's a very difficult thing to get around to determine whether we're making good policy or not. But let me just ask this question, which is, what is unsatisfactory about the current situation that would require a hearing officer? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And I do want to refer back to the concern that the good senator raised about whether this has changed. I do want to point out that the wording that is in this section was in regarding what standard of review will be used, which is what I think you were referring to with by using the words just cause. That standard of review has not changed since it was JF'd out of the committee. But, clearly, this will present an opportunity for, like all other public sector workers who are covered by collective bargaining agreements, to have the opportunity that their termination will be go before an impartial, trained, experienced, professional arbitrator to render a binding decision. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. And I appreciate the gentlelady's comments about the language of the bill, but I understand this was substitute language that was provided to us on the day of the vote, which is why I may not still be familiar with it. It's just an example of how bill language does evolve and change over time, and even those of us that are most informed, sometimes it's difficult for us to keep up, mostly because there are thousands of bills and I don't know which one's coming next. It's kind of like swatting a swarm of bees and trying to make sure you don't get the one that's going to sting you. But sadly, a lot of these this have a tendency to leave a mark. My concern with this is that I don't think that there's a problem. First off, my wife I mentioned is a teacher. I know a number of teachers. She has a lot of friends. We're all friendly. I always run these policies by them. I'm like, what do you guys think? And I think that they would universally agree, and they're happy about it, that they have a pretty good deal. They got a lot more protections than the average person does in an average job. It's not easy to get fired from being a teacher. You have a union who is protecting you more often than not, and you're going to have them arguing on your behalf to protect you for any type of unfair treatment. This is something people in the private sector don't have. I mean, people in the private sector have at-will employment in the state of Connecticut. You can be terminated at any time for any reason, period, end of discussion, unless your civil rights are being violated, of course. But the fact of the matter is that in the private sector, there's no such protection at all. And I don't begrudge teachers having protections. I think it's a hard job. I know what my wife goes through as a school teacher, and I certainly respect it. The thing is that we seem to be moving the ball to create even more protections when I don't know we have a problem to begin with. So that would be like the first question that I would have for the chairman on the substance of the hearing officer, which is what's broken? What is the problem? Are there instances where teachers are being fired unfairly across the state of Connecticut? Through you.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And we did hear from a number of teachers and their representatives that, in fact, there are problems with the system that currently exists. And that is why we chose to make sure that, like all other public sector employees with unions, and I would note also, on almost virtually every union contract in the private sector as well, these are the standard procedures for discipline and discharge. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Can I just ask the good chairman how that standard of having a hearing officer got to be in those contracts? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, there are two things. The good senator mentioned the standard that's in the contracts. The standards are separate from the procedure. The procedure is having a neutral arbitrator render a decision. The standard of review is something separate. Both in those instances and in the instances of all these public sector workers, those are negotiated between the parties. And in fact, this language references that when it suggests that the standard of review will be the review standard used that had been negotiated between the parties. That would be the Board of Education and the teachers. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Just to clarify, my question was really focused on the standard of having a hearing officer. I wasn't really referring to the standard of review, but you did answer that question, so I appreciate it. But the answer to my question is very simple, and that's collective bargaining. That's how that got there. The fact is that the parties negotiated those terms. The representatives of the teachers union and the municipalities decided to enter into an agreement with one another, and they negotiated those terms. And ultimately, in the case of other types of unions around the state, they have indeed, in many cases, the unions have won the opportunity to have an impartial hearing officer arbitrate any dismissals or terminations. That doesn't exist for teachers, but what's happening here is that the Connecticut General Assembly is putting their weight on the scale by suggesting that they're not going to allow the teachers union and the municipality to negotiate these terms. They're not going to allow them to collectively bargain. They're going to just put it into the statute. And I've mentioned this a number of times, which is that, on one hand, I think it's somewhat concerning that the legislature would take a position in favor of one of the parties versus the other. I think that's problematic by itself. I think that you ought to be careful about putting your weight on the scale in what is a private negotiation, effectively, even if it's for a service provided to the public. But the other thing is that when you do such a thing, you are denying the parties the ability to negotiate that away. So sometimes when you are making sure that you're protecting the teachers in this case by giving them this additional benefit, this is one less thing that they can negotiate, and therefore it's one less thing that the municipality can negotiate as well. So it's just like any negotiation. Like if I was going to make an agreement to take some kind of employment and they're offering me health insurance, but I'm like, I don't want the health insurance because I'm on my wife's health insurance, for example. But you could pay me more. And they're like, no, you got to take the health insurance. And it's like, well, that doesn't help me. So I'm just suggesting that the constant desire for the state government to insert itself repeatedly over and over in every transaction, public and or private, to get itself involved in every contract is not helping people. It might have the appearance, it might have a result of in the net helping some people sometimes. But overall, what you're doing is interfering with the party's ability to actually have the freedom to negotiate better benefits for themselves. And in this particular case, my concern also is that I think the teachers are in a pretty good spot already by having union representation, by having the ability to have a set of standards that determine when they can be terminated that people in the private sector don't have. They don't need the addition of this arbitrator. And what this is going to do is, in the case where a municipality does want to get rid of a teacher, which I think is extremely rare, and I think generally happens at a certain significant point of conflict, it's going to make it that much harder for that school district to operate. And the school district, when I say that, is the elected body of the town representing the people of the town in the decision making about who works in the school district. So this effectively is a policy that undermines the will of the people of every town in Connecticut when it denies the right of their representatives to make a determination. That's what it does. And that is not just rhetoric, that's a fact. And what will happen as a result is that in a case where a teacher legitimately should be terminated, they are going to have an extra level of protection that will cause a tremendous delay, first off, because the school, first off, this also changes the entire environment in which we're operating, because now this school is going to realize that it's not as easy as it once was, so they might not bother even attempting it. So we'll leave a less than desirable teacher in place. But if the case happens that it does reach that level and that teacher really truly should be terminated, it's going to take longer. You're going to have a situation where they're going to have this ability to call into question the standards. They're going to be able to use the hearing officer and the Board of Education, the superintendent's office, everyone that is on that side of the disagreement are going to be put aside. And in the meantime, this is going to cause a increased expense for the town and that school district, and ultimately the taxpayers that live in that town. And that's my concern here, which is, if I thought for a second that there were quality teachers being terminated left and right across Connecticut for unjust reasons, I'd be the first one jumping in front of the bus to save them. But I just don't think that's happening. I think what's happening here is just a power grab. And it is the majority coming along once again to say, oh, we're going to stick our nose in and we're going to, unlevel the playing field in favor of our friends and at the expense of everyone else. But the net result is not good policy. And that's what we should be focused on. What is the best possible policy? And the best possible policy, in my view, is not to tie the hands of the administration in every town across Connecticut when it comes to choosing their teachers. I would like to see those administrators have the power to actually make sure that they are keeping good teachers employed and bad teachers unemployed. And I think that this, while the potential is here, and I acknowledge it, and this is not an easy thing to talk about, because I guarantee you whatever I say here is going to be misconstrued or twisted around in some other way. But the fact of the matter is, I'm talking about good policy and fairness. And there's going to be people tied up in this policy. There's going to be good teachers tied up in this policy unfairly, and there are going to be bad teachers tied up in this policy. And what should happen? And in my view, the good teachers should be protected and the bad teachers should go. I think that this protects bad teachers. I think that's what this policy does. And not only does it protect bad teachers, it protects bad teachers at the expense of taxpayers. And for that reason, I'm concerned about it. And through you, Madam President, does the chairman have an alternative viewpoint that maybe she could encourage me to see the light, to understand that I'm getting this all wrong and this is not going to protect bad teachers? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, there is much that the good senator has said that I disagree with, that I think is inaccurate, but I do feel like it's important to correct the record on this instance, because the reference that's being made about government putting the thumb on the scale on the side of the teachers in this instance, it's really quite the opposite, because the statute has put the thumb on the side of the superintendent and the Board of Education for decades, and we are correcting that, because in fact this statute prohibits the ability to negotiate with your employer for a neutral arbitrator rendering a binding decision. That has been in statute, and what we're doing is saying that now these teachers will have the opportunity to go to binding arbitration like every other public sector employee that we have that has access to that. We prohibited that. The government decided that. And now we're deciding that was bad policy, and we're allowing for neutral arbitration. I recognize that, in fact, in many of these cases, there may be a case that the superintendent will prevail, and in other cases, maybe the union will prevail. But the whole basis for binding arbitration and a just cause standard of review, the whole basis for that is to make sure that there is nothing that it's to correct mistakes or perhaps intentional wrongdoing. I don't think that's happening all over the state of Connecticut, but I don't know how anyone could think that there is never a mistake made by any administrator in any school in the state of Connecticut. That's unfathomable to me, because people make mistakes. Good people make mistakes. And so this isn't about demonizing boards of education or demonizing superintendents. In fact, I think we have outstanding superintendents in our state. I happen to be fortunate that in my district we have three wonderful superintendents and very good board of education. But people make mistakes, and everyone, I believe, should be entitled to due process and a neutral decision maker. And I firmly believe that. I think it's good public policy, and I think we know that as a state, and that's why we've extended it to every other classification of employee in our state. We don't say that the mayor is the only one that gets to make the decision on the people in public works. We don't say that. We don't say that the mayor is the only one who gets to make a decision on our police police officers. This is, I think that it was unfortunate that it took us this long to get to this point. But I'm very, very proud of this piece of legislation. It's something I've advocated for years because I think it's fair and I think it's just and I think it's good for the state of Connecticut. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the passion in which my colleague expresses herself on this subject, but this is a matter of perspective, and I have to tell you that the perspective that we're hearing is one that does not recognize the reality of the world that we live in, that the vast majority of people are not public employees, and they don't have any of this benefit at all, nor should they. We live in an at-will state, and at-will employment is the only thing that protects the viability of enterprise to exist. It gives the ability for employers to choose who their employees are. And in the case of public sector employees, the fact of the matter is that we have boards of education, which are allegedly the employers on behalf of the people who are the real employers of a community that hire and fire the staff, including the teachers in our school districts. And this is tying their hands. It's telling the actual employers, which are the people that live in that town, that they don't have the authority to determine who the teachers are. That authority is going to be shifted to a third party. And I understand that the good chairman thinks that that's fair and everyone should be entitled to that. But I just think it's a matter of perspective to recognize that only people who live in their government-centric worldview agree with that. The rest of us that live in the real world, who had to make sure we worked really hard to keep our jobs, because we live in a competitive environment where your job is not guaranteed the next day, don't see it that way. So if you're out there and you're in the private sector right now and you have a real job and your employer is the one that decides whether or not your employment continues, think about what we're talking about here. You're thinking about someone expecting to have the right to be able to tell their employer that they don't have the ability to make decisions about who their employees are any longer. It's a little frustrating to hear the moral authority of the statement that somehow anyone who disagrees that there should not be parity in this case, because it is the townspeople that are ultimately the deciders of what a school district looks like. And this is the feeling that prevails in my mind on everything to do with education, which is this: teachers work for the school district, and the school district works for the people in the town. And in my view, it's the people in the town that should decide what the school district does. They should decide not just who the teachers are, but they should be deciding the curriculum, right? But this majority doesn't agree with any of that. They believe the government should dictate everything and that the people should just sit back and take a back seat. And we're hearing that type of arrogance in these arguments. And I don't mean to be rude or discredit my colleague in any way, but that's the perspective, the we know better than the people on the street perspective. Well, in the case of teachers or school districts, the people on the street are the boss. They're the ones paying the taxes. They're the ones funding the existence of the school. They're the one paying the salaries of the superintendent and the teachers. And I believe they should have the right to dictate who they employ. I don't think it's a crazy idea at all. So we just have a fundamental disagreement here. Now, this section of the bill, I'm not trying to make it out as if it's the most terrible thing on earth, because I'm not even necessarily opposed to this section, but I did think it was important for us to hash out kind of this different perspective on the worldview we have here. I believe good teachers need to be protected, but I also believe bad teachers need to go. And I don't think there's a problem in Connecticut where good teachers are being let go unfairly. I just don't. I'm not seeing that. It's not coming across my plate. I've never actually heard from a single teacher in my district saying I was fired for unjust reasons. It's never happened. But I do hear from parents. I'm aware that there are certain teachers that I think the school districts across the state would prefer that they didn't have in their employ, and they don't have a mechanism to get rid of them. And this is going to make it even harder to get rid of teachers that they don't agree with, that they don't believe should be employed there. And I believe that this is absolutely, there's no way to deny that this is actually putting weight on the scale. That's what this bill does. You may agree with where the weight is being placed, but I don't. It's not the end of the world, but the net result is even in a case where justice is prevailing, the taxpayers will pay more. The taxpayers will pay more because of this, because nothing will happen on the timeline that it happens now. It will cost money and attorneys and court dates and waiting for arbitration, and meanwhile, the school district is in a state of flux that they do not control their own destiny, and the teachers, the people of the district are at the will of an arbitrator who is just a disinterested third party. Now, I mean, you could say that like it's a good thing, but sometimes I don't want disinterested third parties making up decisions for me. And this is a decision that I believe is the school district's decision. It's not a decision that should be decided between the teacher and the school district. It's the school district's decision. So with that, let's move on to the next section, which, by the way, Section 8, which we discussed, in comparison to Section 9, is one of the better sections in the bill, because Section 9 is possibly one of the worst policies that we will see in this legislative session. This is a extreme overreach of our state government. I mean, we have witnessed it all, folks, in the last several years, and especially in this session where the majority continues to interfere with the individual property rights of its citizens. It is regulating industry to the point where they don't get to make their own decisions anymore. We're telling school districts that they don't get to decide who they employ. And now we're going to tell businesses that when they purchase another business or simply take purchase the property location of another business, that they must maintain the existing employees. So they don't get to decide who the employees that they have are. The state's going to tell them. It's madness. What rights do people have anymore in our state if the state government can come along and start dictating stuff like this to people? Can the good chairman describe, in her words for me, the policy that is contained in Section 9 and the problem it proposes to solve?
Senator Kushner.
Oh, thank you, Madam President. It's good to see you up there. I can describe a situation that occurred in the town that I live in, Danbury. A couple of years ago, there's a company in our community that works for the defense industry, and for many years had contracted out janitorial services for that workplace. And with 2 weeks' notice, workers were told that the contract was that it had come to the end of the contract and they were going to use a new contractor for janitorial services. And people who had worked there for as much as 20 years were given 2 weeks' notice that they were going to be out of work. And I went and met with those folks, and it was really horrible. They had to feed their families. They have kids in school. It was extremely hard on them. And no one said, "You're not doing a good job." No one was under discipline. They simply said, "We're going to bring in a different contractor." And I thought that was the wrong thing for our community. I thought it was bad for our community to see workers out of work and suffering under those circumstances. This bill would change that. This would say that, in fact, the new contractor would have to retain those workers for up to 90 days. There's all kinds of built-in protections that during the period where the contractor who's being terminated can still discipline and discharge workers in accordance, with good cause, and that an employer, a contractor, can still, with cause, terminate an employee who they feel is not doing the job. The successor contractors, there are protections built in there. But what doesn't happen is we don't see people thrown out of work on short notice and left in our community without the resources that they had for some of them for many, many years. I think this is a really important piece of legislation because it will protect these workers and give them an opportunity to show the new employer that they are able to do the work. There's lots of protections built into here that require that it be similar work that is being contracted for, and I think that it was really well thought out legislation. So to me, this is very fundamental about giving people opportunities that you so often speak about, good Senator, about giving people the opportunity to prove themselves to a new employer. So I think it's important legislation, and you asked me why I saw this piece of legislation, and you got my full story through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the sincerity in which my colleague approaches these things, but I hope people are paying very close attention to what they're hearing. The policy that is before us pretends that those who vote for it are creating opportunity. That's kind of what we just heard the good chairman. And again, I don't mean to be impolite, but she's trying to take credit for the idea that this bill would give people opportunity. And the fact is that this building and this policy does not create opportunity. It doesn't do that at all. In fact, government only has the ability to take things away. It doesn't really have the ability to create much. And in this particular situation, I'm as sympathetic to anyone else if someone loses their job with little notice, but that does happen. Companies go out of business. Companies are taken over. Things change. Entire industries fail. There used to be horse and buggy industries in this country. Things change. This legislature picks and chooses winners and losers all the time. And I'm the guy stopping them, trying to say, no, don't do this. The Uber and Lyft folks came along and they were like, no, we know that there's existing laws for taxis, but you know what? We're just going to create an entirely different set of rules for people that actually do the same thing. Because we can. This building is responsible for more businesses disappearing and people being unemployed than the private sector itself. And to take credit for creating opportunity is a joke. And you're not creating anything. What you're doing is you're forcing a new business that might be purchasing that establishment to hire employees. Maybe the reason why the previous business failed and had to fold is because they couldn't afford the employees they had, or maybe their employees were bad. Who knows? I just want people to ponder the notion of what made us the most successful country on earth, and that is freedom of association, number one, which is what this bill conflicts with more than anything else. You can decide where you want to work. Now, I understand people have limited choices, especially depending on their skill set and their needs in life, but you can also work to improve those things. That's what America's about, is to get yourself in a position to succeed. And frankly, if people out there feel like they're victims and they're not succeeding, I bet you anything that one of the biggest impediments you're dealing with is government. because this government has a tendency to interfere with the ability for people to succeed. The reason why I'm standing here, the reason why I ran for office is because I want opportunity for my constituents. I believe in the American dream that I learned about as a kid. And I believe that still exists. I know it's harder to attain than ever before. We ought to reverse that. I also remember America being number one on every list. And our kids in school, smartest kids in the world, best productive manufacturing in the world, best scientists, best doctors. And I know we've slipped in some of these areas. And that hurts. But the way back is to peel back the layers and layers of interference in the free market that this government in this state and nationally over decades has eroded. This bill is offensive to freedom. This section of this bill tells you that if you are going to purchase a business, that it doesn't belong to you, that it belongs to the state of Connecticut, that the chairman of the labor committee and her friends are going to tell you what your obligations are. So you worked your whole life, saved your money, put yourself in a position to buy a business entity, not just for yourself. Certainly you're doing it because you want to succeed and become successful and maybe become wealthy, but you also want your employees to succeed side by side with you. No, that doesn't matter what you were trying to do. It doesn't matter the effort that you put in. No. The Democratic majority of the state of Connecticut is going to tell you what you have to do. And they're going to tell you who your employees are. You don't get to pick. They will pick for you. This is a very broad-based bill as well. It applies to multifamily residential dwellings with 50 units or more, commercial centers, municipal office buildings, public and non-public schools, museums, convention centers, arenas, shopping malls, bank branches, industrial sites, pharmaceutical labs, train stations, warehouses, and on and on and on. So if you are some entrepreneurial spirit and you're in Connecticut or you're outside Connecticut thinking about coming here, you're going to have to ask yourself, do I want to go and invest in Connecticut where the state of Connecticut majority party thinks they have the right to tell me who's got to be employed by my company? I got to tell you, as a bit of an entrepreneur myself, that's a bit of a red flag. I want to run my own company, thank you very much, Connecticut Democrats. I don't need you to tell me how to do it. And I'm here shaking my head because I just can't even believe that we're having this conversation. It's shocking to my senses. I grew up in this country recognizing the notion that when I get up in the morning, I'm a free citizen. And that I get to do certain things as a free citizen. I get to make my own choices, and sometimes they're good and they're bad. And we're a product of our experience, and our degree of success is based on our choices. And sometimes a bit of luck as well. But the fact of the matter is, you're allowed to make bad choices in America. If you make bad choices, you'll have bad results. If you make good choices, chances are you'll have better results. And that's a good thing. But I would imagine, just based on common sense, that I saved my money since growing up in high school so that I could enter into some sort of business arrangement and take over the contracting at some facility, for example, that I'd be able to pick and choose who I'm going to hire to work with me. What if I want to bring my employees with me? What if I got a bunch of family members that are all worked up, ready to start this business with me? Maybe we're going to all work for free for a little bit to get ourselves off the ground. Nope. Can't do it. You're going to have to take on the existing employees and pay them at the current rate of pay. Can I ask through you, Madam President, how this would encourage a potential investor in industry to make a purchase of a affected business entity in the state of Connecticut? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, would the good senator reframe the question? It's very broad, and I'm not certain what answer he's looking for. It certainly isn't written into the statute. If I understand you, you're asking my opinion. Is that correct? Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam President. When we write policy, we should also consider the effect and impact of that policy. I mean, I don't think that that's a foreign idea to anyone. So my question is about the impact of the policy. So I'm asking if the senator agrees with me that the impact of this policy would be to disincentivize financial entrepreneurial activity in Connecticut. Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Now I understand the question, and the answer is no, I do not agree. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Can I just ask how? I'd like to know how the chairman can disagree that telling a potential employer that they do not get to make their own hiring decisions is not going to disincentivize them. Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I do want to point out that this bill is very specific as to which categories of employees it covers, and it is identifying the situation where the employer, the company that made this major investment in the state of Connecticut and brought its business here, they are making the decision to contract out that work. They're not prohibited from hiring employees and have complete control of how those employees are treated, aside from any statutory requirements we might have. But that is still their prerogative. And in fact, it used to be that most employers did hire these services and manage them themselves. And we have moved to a time in our nation where most of these companies now contract this out and then change contractors. So we're talking not about prohibiting the major investors that come into this state to build, for instance, an aerospace defense business here. In fact, it goes to the contractors that they hire and the opportunities we want to see secured for the workers who maybe served in those positions, as they had in my community for so many years, without being discarded very brutally after just a few weeks' notice. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I appreciate the additional information that I didn't ask for, because I'm trying to get not to the detailed of the bill. I'm trying to get to the policy here. I mean, this is what's missing from our conversations in the legislature, I think, which is that we don't have conversations. We don't actually debate the policy. I ask a question about the policy, and I don't get an answer. I get an answer about, well, this bill affects this group of people. I'm like, no, well, is it going to work? Is this going to help? I mean, it's illogical. If I buy a business, am I not the owner of that business? Most people would say yes. Well, as the owner of the business, should I determine who I should get to hire? Most people would say yes. Only a few select people would be like, no, actually you shouldn't. You should hire the people we tell you to. The fact of the matter is that in the circumstances that this bill intends to cover, I think it's extremely likely that someone that's moving in to take over the contracted help at some facility probably would rehire the vast majority of the people there. But why obligate them? Why force them? And believe me, that's what this is. Because government only operates by one thing, and that is force. There is no may here. This is a mandate. This is a requirement using the force of law. That you have got to comply. Your freedom is denied. You have got to do it the way we say. That is the concern with this policy. The good chairman opened up with, well, I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to help the people that got laid off. I got it. Then you should hire them, is my answer. Then you should give them a job. You shouldn't tell someone else.
Excuse me, Senator Dove.
Thank you, Madam President. Can we stand at ease, please?
Stand at ease. The chamber will stand at ease. Senator Dove.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to yield to Senator Sampson.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. Madam President, I want to apologize if I came across as if I was mimicking my colleague. I had no intention of trying to mock anyone or make some sort of derogatory comment. I certainly respect that we have a different worldview, but I don't agree that that worldview is legitimate, not in America, and that's what I'm concerned with. And I don't want to give it credibility as a worldview. I'll respect my colleague, but not the idea behind the policy, which is that this state government has the ability to dictate to private entities who they should hire. And I will go back to what I was saying, which is that if you're so concerned about these employees losing their jobs, and that's a perfectly natural thing to feel, and I would feel it also, then you should hire them, or you should give them charity, or you should allow them to live in your home or your apartment building if you own one. What you should not do is use your position in the state government to go ahead and tell some other innocent bystander that now they're obligated to give them a job. That is absurd. I mean, that is as bad as telling people that we're going to let illegal immigrants into the country and we're going to tell them that they can live in your home. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, by the way, we have some new residents, and they're going to take up your third bedroom because we understand it's not being used. The government doesn't have the right to tell free people that they have to use their resources and their abilities to do things like that. And there's a good reason for it. And we actually have constitutional protections on the subject of freedom of association. And this bill ignores that. It tells this employer that is making this purchase that they don't have the freedom to determine who they want to hire for a business. And frankly, I got to tell you, if that's the law, then you don't own the business. It's not your business. It's the state's business. You're just borrowing it, if that. What is the logic, through you, Madam President, on denying the employer the right to choose their own employees? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, the bill provides that they will have to retain employees for 90 days. And as I've said earlier in my remarks, that the purpose of this and it anticipates that in the jobs that are specified here, that the new contractor would find that those employees would have the opportunity to find that those employees can perform the work adequately as they've been doing it for, in some cases, many, many years. And that would be a good transition for the employees, and we think that it would result, as it does in many, many instances. I think the part that may be missing here is that a lot of the contractors in these fields, they don't have workers sitting at home waiting to be put on a job. They get a contract and then they hire people to fill that contract. In this case, we're saying use the people that are there, give them an opportunity to show you that they can do the job. And that obligation is for 90 days. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the answer. What we're missing here is that it's not up to this Democratic majority in the state legislature to decide that. That's what we're missing here. And there's nothing stopping the new employer from taking job applicants, including the people that already work there? Do these people that are held over, for lack of a better term, through you, Madam President, do they apply for the new job through you?
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, there is language in this section of the bill that provides all the mechanisms that would be used to notify the employees. And I think if you give me a moment, I'll find the line. If you look at line 844, it begins to describe the process of that 15 days prior to the commencement of the first performance of service under the successor contract. There's information provided to the employees, and it's very detailed. It doesn't require that you use exactly this format, but it suggests that it should be like this format. If you want me to find the specific words for that, I can. It says on line 848, shall hand deliver a written offer of employment in substantially the form set forth below. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The word that I used was apply for a job. And nothing in here says that they actually apply for a job. Nothing. It basically requires the successor employer to provide the job and also potentially a permanent job. But it doesn't suggest that the employee has to do anything. It doesn't require them to apply for anything. They're just awarded the job. And what this is called in plain language is forced hiring. That's what it's called in plain language. That is what we're talking about, forced hiring. That is what's happening. The state is forcing this business to hire people. They don't have any choice. Can I just ask, what if it's not working out? What if the reason why the previous business was failing is because they had bad employees, and now we've required, through forced hiring, the new business to go ahead and take on the same people? What if, how can they measure whether or not within the 90 days that person is performing to the degree that they determine is satisfactory? Or is there some other standard that says whether or not the employer has to maintain them? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, if you look to Section 7 and 8, it does provide an opportunity for the employer to discharge an employee during that period. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. So instead of having the rights of every other employer in the state of Connecticut that can hire what employees they choose and terminate employees at will, now it says that they can discharge, the successor employer shall not discharge without just cause. And so now just cause is required, although just cause is based on the performance or conduct of the particular employee. But it doesn't give the employer any other reasons, like they have a better applicant or a different applicant or a family member they want to give a job to. No, you don't get to do that. Not your business. Belongs to the state of Connecticut. We make all the choices around here. You're just the lowly business owner who doesn't get to decide what to do with your own business anymore, because we know what's better, and you can't handle it. It's shocking to me. This is such a provocative section. I was thinking that this is like the meat of the debate that we would have today, that this is the subject matter that really ought to get out in front of people, just the immense amount of arrogance that this majority has, that they think that they can go ahead and start forcing behavior like this. And this is an insane amount of power that is being taken from the people of Connecticut. And if you're somebody who is not a business owner that is in a position of making purchase, like one of these particular business entities that is being referred to in this bill, and therefore you look at it like, no big deal, believe me, it's a big deal to you too. Because when the state government decides they're going to start having the ability to tell people who they have to hire or what employees they have to retain, or taking away their ability to dismiss people at will like every other employer has in the state, they have reached way, way, way beyond any notion of what the limited role of our state government should be. And that means that they also are poised and ready to start interfering in your life in some way that you would never imagine that they would have the ability to do also. It's very concerning. This section of this bill is shocking. It is shocking to the point at which the majority seems to think that because they think there's a better idea, that they were elected to tell free people that they must follow their guidance. We have people across this country, and I think even right outside today, we had people protesting no kings. Well, that's king-like behavior. You know, the idea behind no kings is that we do not want government officials dictating our freedom and telling us how to live. And this whole bill is telling people how to live, one thing after another. And this is just an extreme example. When you talk to people on the street and you tell them the state is going to tell businesses that when they buy another business, they have to retain those employees, whether they want to or not, the first reaction I get from people is, no, they can't do that. Well, I got news for you. They're about to. This bill has already been through the House of Representatives. If it passes through this chamber today, which I presume it will, then it's only a signature of the governor away from being the law. And what an unbelievable power grab we will have witnessed at that point, folks. This bill applies to employers with as little as only 2 employees. It's not that I'm saying it would be okay if it was limited to large corporations, but it's not. This affects tiny mom and pop operations too. Mom and pop operations that might want to bring members of their own community. I keep thinking of contracted service workers, because that's really what this is about, although it reaches far beyond that in the letter of what's before us. But I can just imagine, I have a friend who runs a cleaning company, and I know that she has her own crew. She knows these people. They've worked with her for years. She trusts them. She knows that she can trust them with their equipment that they have. She knows that they're going to perform the job satisfactorily so that she's going to please her customers. And this bill takes all that away. This bill says that you don't get to decide that anymore. You're going to have to take on some employees that are completely unknown to you, that may have been the reason for the previous business failing or choosing to abandon what it was doing. That we should be here preserving choice. That's what we should be doing. We should be here preserving the freedom of our residents to be able to enter into contracts and take on new entrepreneurial activity, and we should be supporting them by suggesting that they have the right to come up with new things and great ways of doing stuff and become wildly successful. That's what we should be doing. We should not be dictating to them, micromanaging them, and suggesting, and I'm talking about people, a lot of them who have never had a job or owned a business or let alone done something in the private sector that required risk, that they got to do it the way the state government tells them to, including dictating to them who they must employ. It's shocking. And with that, Madam President, I'm going to offer another amendment. Thank you very much, Madam President. The clerk is in possession of LCO number 5578. I ask that the clerk please call this amendment, and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
LCO number 5578, Senate Amendment D.
The question is on adoption. Will you remark?
Thank you very much. Madam President, this is a very straightforward amendment. It would simply strike the section that we are talking about. The section that is about service contract worker retention is the way it's been described. And basically, it's a section of the bill that would say that the majority party in the state of Connecticut will now dictate who some businesses must employ in the state, irregardless of the wishes, desires, and freedom of the business owner themselves. And I move adoption of this amendment, which would simply strike Section 9, and I'd like a roll call vote. Thank you.
A roll call vote will be ordered. Will you remark further? Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the amendment.
Will you remark further? If not, would the clerk please announce a roll call vote, and the machine will be opened.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment D. This is not the bill. We're voting on Senate Amendment D for House Bill number 5003 as amended. An act concerning workforce development and working conditions in the state. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment D. This is a vote on the amendment. Amendments. Senate D. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment D. House Bill number 5003. This is not the bill.
Have all the members voted? If all the members have voted, the machines will be locked. Would the clerk please announce the tally?
Senate Amendment D House Bill 5003. Total number voting 36, total voting yea 11, total voting nay 25, absent not voting 0.
The amendment fails. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Disappointed, though, as always, I can't say that I am surprised that yet another amendment would fail on a party line vote. I have been doing my amendments kind of section by section, but there's so much more to say about Section 9 that I can't move on to Section 10 until I just add a couple of quick additional comments. And that is that I've already established the main problem with this, which is that the new employer does not have the freedom to choose their own employees. It's an absurdity on its face. I made that argument at the outset. I stuck with that argument throughout because I think it's the most compelling thing that I can say about this section. But it's not the only problem with the section. There's a lot of other things, including the fact that what we're doing is we're dealing with the private information of the employees. We're dealing with the information of the employer that is leaving with regard to the employees. We, in fact, make that leaving former employer a middleman that is now obligated by the Connecticut General Assembly to provide information. It's like, who do they work for? Are they going to be compensated for that? Of course not. This is the arrogance I'm talking about. That this majority thinks that they can just start telling private citizens that they have to do work that the state requires, that is no benefit to them, that they're not compensated for in any way, shape, or form. It just shocks me. The definitions in the bill are unbelievably broad. I tried to ponder what might be included in the definitions, and I gave a list at the outset, but I'm in no way convinced that that is the limitation of the bill. I think this is going to affect a great many types of businesses, a great many types of employees. I don't understand why, if you have one cleaning company replacing another, that they have to inherit the obligations of the prior employer. What if the reason why the new businesses is buying it is because they want to change the business model so that they actually don't have the same employment structure? They don't have the same types of employees. What if they go in to a service industry and their plan is to automate part of it because that's the only way they can succeed in the Connecticut environment that I described earlier? They won't be able to because they're going to be forced to have to keep the same employees. There's all these timelines in this bill, too. It's like super difficult to follow. I was trying to read this quickly, knowing I had to get ready for this debate to come out here. But it's like super hard to figure out what's going on. And it's like in 15 days you have to do that. And in 2 days they don't do this. It goes on and on. But one thing I noticed is that you got the prior business owner has got to hand over worker information. Again, that worker information is not the business of the new employer. Frankly, it's not. It's just not their business. And yet the state is going to say, well, not only is it our business that we're going to demand you provide this information, but we're going to go ahead and tell you you have to give it to your successor business, which might be somebody who's buying you out. It might even be a hostile takeover, for crying out loud. And you're going to have to aid the new business in having this information. I didn't ask all these questions, but they're worthy of answers. You know, what privacy protections are in place regarding the employee information? Why should the departing contractor be forced to help the new contractor or new business run their business? I mean, generally, when this happens in the private sector and people are engaging in a transaction like this, they work all these details out. And sometimes that is a part of the deal. You know, we're gonna buy your insurance agency, use an example, something I'm familiar with, but we're gonna keep a couple of your people here, and we're even gonna keep the owner as a principal for a short period of time during a transitionary period until we get established. That happens. People enter into negotiations like that all the time of their free will. These are contracts that people make because that's how it works in business, right? But here, it's all happening by force. It's all happening by force. It's all happening because the majority party tells people that they have to do these things. Not because they want to, not because they are negotiating terms that are beneficial to themselves, not because they're going to be compensated in those terms. They are being forced. They're being told what to do. Free people should not be being told what to do by their government. What if there are disputed records? What if someone is in the midst of a labor dispute at the time that the transaction occurs? These are all questions that are not answered here, and they're going to create complications, and what they're also going to create probably is litigation. And the people that benefit from litigation are lawyers. That's who makes money when there's litigation. Not the business owners, and certainly not the employees involved that are allegedly the ones being protected. A lot of things can happen. You could have a purchase occur, and within the 90-day framework, you could have another change in ownership, which means that you could have this multiple successive situation where people are being forced to take on employees from an employer that didn't hire those employees to begin with. I don't know how you become an employee without ever applying for a job. I guess this is how you do it. The notice that is laid out in the bill that starts on line 850 is remarkable. You're forcing someone to send a notice to someone saying, you have a right to be hired by my company. I can't even believe it's there. Anyway, there would be a lot better ways to encourage a smooth transition. And one of those ways, I believe, would be to try and make Connecticut a more encouraging place to do business to begin with, so that there were more opportunities, generally speaking. I noticed, by the way, something I did not get into before offering the amendment was the penalties and the rights of action and the involvement of various entities. I believe we're maximizing the pressure towards litigation, and there's not a lot of solutions that are amenable in this bill. It's all about punishments that include back pay, maybe with interest. The remedies are not simple. It's all tilted towards maximum requirements for compliance via force. And that's what concerns me. And of course, like so many bills these days, it includes the Attorney General as a mechanism to resolve issues in what is a private dispute. And it concerns me because I don't think that's the role of the Attorney General, generally speaking. This bill tells a new employer who it must hire, tells them how long they have to keep them, tells the employer how to rank them based on their performance. It doesn't get to let them make the determination of how that works. It limits the mechanisms for which those employees could be terminated, and it creates lots of lawsuits. That's the bottom line what this bill is, except for it also denies the freedom of association in such a significant way that we have not seen before in Connecticut statute. And I believe that this bill and this vote that we just took on that amendment, and ultimately we'll take on this bill, will go down in the history of the state of Connecticut as one of the significant changes in the amount of authority that this state government under this Democratic majority has taken for itself. It is really that egregious. I want to just move on to section, I believe it's 10 through 12. And this series of sections that's coming up, and forgive me while I rotate my pages to get to the right place, is all about what I think is great policy. So frustrating to see the juxtaposition of a bill that I would co-sponsor, that I would run through broken glass to support, next to something that I think is such an anathema to the freedoms and the policies that I believe we should live under in the state. But there they are, right next to each other. You got this massive power grab in Section 9, and next to it you have Sections 10 through 12, which are recognizing people that have sacrificed for their neighbors in Connecticut as fallen heroes. And this is all about the Fallen Hero Fund, which would pay a benefit to the survivors of first responders, correction officers, and so on. This is a worthwhile endeavor. This is really good policy. This is something that we should have. This is something that should, like it did in the committee, come out as a standalone bill that we could all rally around. We could all stand up and take a picture by the board and say, look, we did something good together. But no, we're going to take this important piece of legislation I want to vote for, and we're going to put it in a crap sandwich, for lack of a better term, that I cannot stand and could never support, denying me the right to do so. It's infuriating. And no doubt it'll come up in an election somewhere across the state where some one of us that voted against this bill will probably be tagged for voting against the Fallen Heroes Fund because it was part of this bill. I should just go on, but I imagine that out of courtesy, I will offer the chairman, if she wants to say a word about this section of the bill, because I do think this is something we can be proud of that we worked on together. So through you, Madam President.
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a section that these sections 10 through 12 do address certain employees when they die in the line of duty while on the job. And what we have done in the past is we've created a Fallen Heroes Fund, and this would provide access to some new classifications, both correction officers in Section 10, investigators in the Judicial Department, and then also there are a number of sections that deal with volunteer firefighters should they die in the line of duty. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I thank the chairman for her work on this portion of the bill. And I'm delighted that we were able to get it to this point. I am sorry that it is connected with the other sections, as I have already mentioned. And I hope she's at least acknowledged my concern there. And hopefully in the future, if we can maybe find a way to separate out the stuff that we agree on so that we can work together to pass that as a bipartisan effort, instead of turning a series of bills that we adamantly disagree with and bills that we absolutely do agree with into the same product in one vote, which is a frustration that I have. So here we are, Section 13.
Senator Kushner.
I apologize for interrupting, but I did leave out one category of employees that I would be very sorry to leave out in mentioning here, because I've spent a lot of time working with that group of employees, and those are the state marshals, and they're also included in here. So I am sorry I interrupted you, but I hate to leave them out. So thank you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. It's my pleasure. The nature of diplomacy, and in fact, throughout the debate, I don't mind if you're compelled to flag me down, and I'm more than happy. I enjoy the fact that we might actually engage in some sort of policy debate. I think that's what's lacking so often, and I don't necessarily expect everyone to agree with me, but I think that us putting an effort into getting the different ideas on this floor for everyone to hear has tremendous value. Okay, section 13. This section, lost my cheat sheet. It has something to do with teacher union dues and payroll deduction. And I'm just taking a quick look here to see if I've got the right information. Through you, Madam President, can I just ask, it looks like the only new language that is here really shows up at the end of paragraph C and the beginning, and also paragraph D. Am I correct about that? And maybe just a description about what this is supposed to achieve through you.
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This is simply codifying what currently exists, which is a payroll deduction for teachers. This is already currently in practice, has been for many, many years, but it's codifying in the Connecticut state statutes. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Can I just ask, this apparently has something to do with the Janus decision, and I'm reading the change that is indicated at the end of paragraph C, where the sentence at the very end is bracketed, that takes out that, and that such service fee be collected by means of a payroll deduction from each employee in the bargaining unit. I'm wondering about the preceding part of section C, where it effectively allows the deduction of dues. I'm trying to just refresh my memory. Shall provide a legal from making an agreement with an executive. Let me phrase it this way: Is the change that is at the end of section C supposed to conform to the Janus decision specifically, and how does it do that? Through you,
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. As I said, there was a change in the Janus decision, and this is, I believe, we're already in conformance in the state of Connecticut to anything that's required under Janus. This codifies the fact that a union and a board of education can come to an agreement for a payroll deduction, and it's simply putting into our statutes what already currently exists as their right under both under past law and under the Janus decision. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I wish I had more time to really dig into this section, because I know just ever since that Supreme Court decision passed, there has been some debate in this legislature about our laws in the state of Connecticut and whether or not we have properly made the necessary changes to account for that decision. And I suspect that something in Section C still would require changes for us to be fully conforming. I'm just not as much of an expert as I would like to be on exactly what it should say or what the problem is. So I'm going to have to leave that for a future discussion at some point. Obviously, this is something that's ongoing, and we will be bringing up this section of statute in the future. There is no question in my mind. I'll just move on. Madam President, through you, can I ask the gentlelady to describe Section 14?
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 14 addresses a program that has currently been a pilot program called Crisis. The acronym is CRISIS, and it stands for Connection to Recovery Through Intervention, Support, and Initiating Services, and that is now being expanded to be statewide. It's a program that engages state police officers in health and it involves them with mental health professionals to really be better prepared for some of the situations that they come across in their line of duty. And I think this is an instance where a pilot project proved very worthwhile, and this section would then expand that. This was a bill in the Public Safety Committee, and I know it's something that had very strong support through you, Madam President.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that description. This is a short paragraph, and I'm familiar with this crisis initiative connection to recovery through intervention, support, and initiating services. And I would support that section if it was a standalone section, and it's unfortunate that it's not. And I would say the same about the next section, too, which is about allowing municipalities to begin offering deferred retirement option plans. And again, it's contained within this larger bill, and that's unfortunate. There are items in this giant 75-section bill that I would gladly support. And if they were presented to me, we could agree to move them very, very quickly without substantive debate. We could have made a lot of things happen without any conflict whatsoever. It is the frustration of sticking the very good with the very bad, in my view, that is what is causing me to engage in protracted debate and the desire to make sure people are aware of what we're doing here, because it's so important that people become aware. Section 16 and 17 appears to be about the virtual monitoring access to information for employees that may be under some sort of disciplinary action to make sure they have access to that information. I don't object to that either. That looks perfectly reasonable. Section 17 has to do with the fiscal intermediary for personal care attendants, something that has been widely debated in a number of my committees. We've had this in the Labor Committee. We had this in the Government Administration and Elections Committee. And it's something that it tends to pop up elsewhere, too. I know Public Health has debated this, and I don't know that we've ever gotten to the bottom of whether it's the fiscal intermediary themselves that's the problem or the data that's provided to them. So I think that this is excellent. This is a way to maybe get to the bottom of what's going on so we can solve it. Then you get to Section 18, which I believe this is a sizable portion of the bill here, Sections 18 through 24, and it's about cranes. Okay, so, I mean, I started this conversation this morning expressing my frustration about heaping all these things together, but this is a labor bill, right? Well, it's not really a labor bill because it also has cranes and lobsters and I don't know what else, utility poles, right? Why is all this stuff in the bill? Through you, Madam President, can the good gentlelady tell me why we have, I think, 5 or 6 sections in the bill about cranes and crane operators and what this does? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And this is a section that came through the Public Safety Committee. And if we could pause for a moment, I will make sure we have someone who can appropriately answer the questions.
Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, these sections that relate to cranes and crane operation, clearly they went through our Public Safety Committee, as some of these labor bills do. And I think that the main concern here is to make sure that our crane operators are properly licensed and that therefore they will operate safely. It's basically a health and safety concern that we would have. It creates enforcement mechanisms for state crane inspectors to be able to ensure that when we have these large pieces of equipment operating, that the environments around them are protected and safe. There's a lot in here that's very detailed. If you see on, for instance, on line 1381, it refers, and defines who a leasee would be, because in some cases the licensed operators are working for a leasee. As I mentioned, this is a piece of legislation that went through our Public Safety Committee, and Madam President, I would like to yield the floor to my good colleague and chair of the Public Safety Committee to respond to some of the questions, and I am sure that he would benefit if the good Senator Sampson would repeat the question for Senator Gaston, and so I will yield the floor to Senator Gaston after he hears the question from Senator Sampson. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And Senator Gaston, do you accept the yield, sir?
I do. Thank you, Madam President. I accept the yield.
Thank you. And please proceed to summarize the section that the senator was asking about. Or Senator, would you like to ask Senator Gaston a question?
Thank you very much, Madam President. I was inquiring about sections 18 through 24, and I'm delighted that Senator Kushner filled me in on the very first question I had, which was whether we were talking about the crane that's a bird or the big metal equipment that people use to move things. And so we've got that covered. I'm certain we're talking about equipment. And of course, it's a mystery to me because this is a labor bill, and this has been inserted in here, and I'm as surprised as anyone that I'm standing here asking questions about it. But I think it's important, since I'm going section by section through the bill, that I get an understanding of what we're changing for policy. So can I maybe just have a brief synopsis of what policy is contained in sections 18 through 24 and what we're hoping to achieve? Are we trying to solve a problem? Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
Thank you, Madam President. So, Madam President, there is a couple of conforming changes for the bill, and so I would ask to be able to go through that relatively quickly, but I think some serious highlights to provide some clarity. So under current law, the examining board for crane operators and DAS, it has 5 members, of which one must be a DAS commissioner with at least 10 years of experience. The entire goal of this particular legislation is to ensure the safety of individuals who are operating cranes within the state. So the bill makes several changes to the Investigatory Enforcement Authority of DAS and the Examining Board for Crane Operators, including to explicitly encompass leasees under this bill. Previously, leasees were not a part of the actual bill itself, and so we know that some individuals who have crane operators who are operating cranes, sometimes they do it interdepartmentally, or at least they share these cranes with people who may lease the cranes out. And so this basically, under this bill, a leasee is any individual or other legal entity that rents or leases a crane or hosting equipment. And so the current law allows the DAS commissioner and DAS employees, while performing their duties and at all reasonable hours, to enter any premises where a crane or hosting equipment is located to enforce the laws applicable to them. And so the bill limits this right of entry to premises that have reason to believe a crane or hosting equipment is located. And so it just gives DAS a little bit more enforcement tool to ensure the safety of individuals while they are working on a particular site relative to the use of cranes.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that very descriptive and thorough, listing of what's in the language that's here. The gentleman mentioned that something about change to the bill, but I think he meant change to the current law, and I do understand that. There are pieces of this that I have some significant knowledge about, certainly when it comes to Section 23, which is all about the Department of Administrative Services and the notion of issuing stop work orders, which I do have some concerns with. But I want to just make sure I understand what's happening first. Is there some impetus to this particular policy coming about? Is there a reason why we're addressing this cranes in this legislative session and felt it was important enough to end up in this bill? I guess is the first question I would ask through you.
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I know that this was critically important for the Public Safety Committee. It came out of committee 29-0, and based on a lot of the testimony that we had heard from construction companies, et cetera, they had some concerns around this. And we also had conversations with DAS. And we just wanted to ensure that we're putting every mechanism in place to make sure we're safeguarding the safety of individuals who may be operating cranes. So I will just read a couple of comments for the record, just so that we see who was on board with this and some of the concerns that was raised during the public safety public hearing. First, DAS adds leasee, and they said, without speaking on behalf of DAS, they want to provide that many cranes are leased, and many construction companies don't own their heavy equipment, and even if they do, they may not have a common practice in our industry for construction companies to lease equipment, and there are equipment rental companies like United Rentals that specialize just in this, but it also is common for construction companies to lease to one another, and so we just want to make sure that the process itself is streamlined and that we are doing everything we can to make sure that even if a person is leasing the equipment, that we have some accountability measures in place to make sure that people who are operating this is kept safe. Also, they wanted to discuss the importance of just making sure that DAS have the enforcement tools necessary to make sure that they are able to issue a stop work order in the event that authorized cranes inspectors are not, the cranes are not operating in a manner in which they should to protect the health and safety of individuals on those sites. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you again, Madam President, and I thank the gentleman for his thorough response. I want to get to the notion of DAS and the enforcement aspect of it in a minute. I'm trying to get enough background to get to that point. And the question I asked is whether it was a specific impetus, and what we heard is that the Public Safety Committee said this bill was important to them. So I don't know if there was an incident. I don't know if there was an accident that occurred. I don't know if there's something that led to this desire for this policy change. That's what kind of I'm asking. And I see in Section 19 seems focused on changing the makeup of this examining board for crane operators. And I guess I would start there with a two-part question, which is, what is the reason for the change in the makeup of this examining board? And is the industry in favor of this policy? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
Thank you, Madam President. It is my knowledge that the industry itself is fully behind this measure. Again, they are very much interested in the safety of individuals who are operating the cranes, which I believe is one of the impetus for the committee taking this issue up relative to what you spoke to recently on sort of what was the reason for us bringing this measure. Presumably, there were, anecdotal instances, and so we want to make sure that we're being proactive opposed to being reactive. And I wish I was able to speak to the specificity of what those issues were. Yes, so technically, there was a gentleman who was using one of the cranes who actually was from Massachusetts and another state. So there was an incident that happened that promulgated this into being to action for the Public Safety Committee. I wanted to also make sure that I was able to thoroughly answer what you were talking about relative to Section 19 of the bill. So they wanted to add, DAS wanted to add 2 additional members to the crane examining board, and 1 additional crane operator and 1 additional crane owner. This was actually suggested by DAS, and I believe they wanted to increase the board members from 5 to 7, given the number of violations that come before the board, and to ensure the board always has good participation and engagement. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. Very interesting to hear about the incident with the Massachusetts individual. I noticed throughout sections 20 and 21 the word arboriculture, which I believe has something to do with the treatment of trees, is being removed, and I'm not certain why. Can the gentleman let me know what that is through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
So, to my recollection from the Public Safety Committee, I believe that Representative Boyd, who is my co-chair, was able to explain that on the floor, but he basically was asked a question by Representative Ware why the word was being removed from the statute, and that is because the word itself now is an obsolete word relative to the industry. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very, very much. It's not that obsolete. We just used it. Madam President, let me just move on to Section 22, where there is a substantive change in the authority of the Department of Administrative Services. The old language said that the commissioner or any employee of the Department of Administrative Services would have the ability to may enter at all reasonable hours into and upon the premises of in or on which a crane or hoisting equipment is located for the purpose of carrying out the provisions of this chapter. And now it's expanded dramatically. Now it also adds this ability to require crane operators to produce verification of operating licenses, which I don't object to, but it does enhance their authority. Require that owner to produce verification of the owner's certificate or registration, and to produce any document establishing an agreement between the operator, owner, or lessee, and so on, which is maybe a little bit heavy-handed, but I understand that the goal here is the safety not only of the crane operator, but also innocent bystanders, and also even the property that may be at risk when a crane is in use. I guess it was important for us to kind of nail down what the other few sections did, because Section 23 does raise a little bit of a red flag for me, because this is an entirely new section, and what it does is it gives the Commissioner of the Department of Administrative Services or an employee of the DAS significant authority here to say they may issue a stop work order against a crane owner, operator, hoisting equipment owner, operator, lessee, or even the person that has contracted that work, if the commissioner determines that such owner, operator, etc., is demonstrating incompetence or negligence, or permitting the operation in an unsafe manner, and so on. And I guess the question I would have is, how does the commissioner of DAS have the knowledge to determine whether or not someone is incompetent when operating a crane? Now, I mean, I suppose that seems like a common sense question, but I don't know anything about cranes, and I don't know that I could look at somebody operating a crane and say whether they were competent in operating it, and I don't know what knowledge the commissioner of DAS is required to have in that regard. So how are they going to make that determination now that they've been given that power through you?
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, I will answer that question by saying that I believe that DAS is the organization of cognizance over this particular matter. I don't know the specificity of the expertise that need to be had by the commissioner, but obviously the commissioner is empowered with this, and I would assume that individuals who are working under the DAS commissioner who do have subject matter expertise in this, and I would assume their involvement based on what the enforcement powers that office has would be able to convey that information to DAS, and I think with all the relevant evidence that they will provide, we'll be able to make that determination that I think will be reasonable based on the facts. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I think that people that are familiar with the debates that we have in this chamber, particularly when I'm standing up, will recognize that I'm often concerned about empowering single individuals in the state of Connecticut governmental structure, whether they're elected or appointed officials, to give them the power to make very substantive decisions that affect the lives of the residents of the state of Connecticut. And this section here is pretty substantive. It really does give the power of the commissioner of DAS, even an employee of DAS, the power to issue a stop work order. And this is something that they can do based on their own subjective opinion. And as I pointed out, I don't believe that there is any requirements that they have tremendous knowledge about how cranes are operated. Someone could simply complain, and they might say, oh, that sounds like a legitimate complaint. Let's stop work here. But we have to remember that if there is a crane on a job site, I bet you it's costing a lot of money to someone. These things are not cheap. They cost a lot of money even to get to a particular job site. And if we're interrupting the ability of the project to go forward, if it is truly for the nature of protecting individuals, the crane operator themselves, or innocent bystanders, then I get it. But I don't see any language in the bill that says that. I just see that they've got this power, and I also see that it extends to the fact that they are essentially judge and jury for quite a while until there is an appeal and several other things have to occur, including a hearing. And ultimately, the commissioner of DAS is also empowered on lines 1506 through 1508 to adopt the regulations that are referenced immediately before at the end of paragraph C. It's kind of interesting that it would say that such hearing shall be conducted in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 54 of the General Statutes, and then it says in Section E, the Commissioner shall adopt regulations in accordance with the provisions and to carry out the purposes of that section. So I think what's happening here is that we're giving the Commissioner of DAS an awful lot of power to inject themselves into when a crane operator may be misbehaving. And I see my colleagues anxious to speak, but I don't know that I'm going to even ask them another thing. So I am not objecting to this section in this bill. In fact, based on what I know and what I've heard, I support it. The question I have overall is, how did it end up in this bill? Why are we not doing this as a separate standalone piece of legislation? And I really just think it's something that is a disservice to the public that I'm the one standing here debating that section. I will take the gentleman's word for it that this is above board, that the Public Safety Committee looked at it, and they have determined that this is necessary to grant the DAS commissioner and employees and staff this power in order to ensure the safe operation of cranes in our state. It's a little, tough for me to swallow that we're going to empower some bureaucrat to be the decider, but okay. So I'm satisfied and happy to move on to the next several sections of the bill, which I would ask the good chairman of the Labor Committee to fill me in about sections 25 and 26, which I believe have to do with something called externships. We've all heard of internships. Well, we're going to learn about externships. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Gaston.
Madam President, before I skate too soon, as a student of jurisprudence, it wouldn't do me any justice to not provide additional clarification regarding the gentleman's question. So I just wanted, for context, to share that the state crane inspectors act on behalf of the DAS commissioner, and they have extensive knowledge, skills, and abilities in their requisite fields, just as other licensing and state inspectors do for electrical work or elevator work, et cetera, within the state of Connecticut. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. So the next sections, there are 225. I believe you referenced 25 and 26. 25, however, is not about externships. It's about making sure that the workforce programs that we are developing in our state, K through 12 education, particularly the CTEC system, and also the Department of Education and the RESCs, we are requiring in Section 25 that there now be a report that will include an inventory of these programs and the numbers of students involved and the total cost, so we can begin to understand and look into these work-based programs. That's Section 25. That doesn't revolve around the externships, but Section 26 creates a 2-year pilot program that would be done in consultation. The Commissioner of Education would oversee this in consultation with the Office of Workforce Strategy, and this is really for the purpose of engaging our faculty in our public schools with industry partners. We are developing career pathway programs throughout the state, and particularly I've had some experience with this in my district, and this would be a 2-year pilot program to provide that interaction between the teaching faculty at our high schools with the industry that they are teaching about, to provide a little more connection and really assist them in providing the classroom instruction that we believe would benefit all. And that's the externship. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and I appreciate the description of those two sections. And yes, I know Section 25 is about work-based learning and the reporting requirements. These are new language, so it's a little tricky to get through when you are reading it as part of this omnibus bill. So that's why I just wanted to make sure I was completely familiar with what's happening in those few sections. I did get a chance to look at some of the next ones more thoroughly. I see Section 27 is about regional workforce navigators, which is another concept. We're very good in the Connecticut General Assembly for creating positions and giving them fancy names. And let's hope regional workforce navigators are a net positive for Connecticut residents, and they do ultimately result in better quality of life. Section 28 is about Department of Labor training on adult education programs. Section 29 has something to do with co-instruction models of teaching utilized by public schools. I am not familiar with this. Through you, Madam President, can I ask the good chairman of the Labor Committee to tell me what this does?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, this is very much goes toward what I described as happening now in our Danbury Public Schools, where we have these career pathways, and the person that we bring in, often a professional person that would co-teach with a certified teacher, might not have the certificate, the teaching certificate, but that would be the co-instruction to try and allow for a professional in a particular field to come in and participate in that classroom. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the answer. Clearly, this is a statute having to do with the Education Committee. and I don't believe it went through our committee in labor, and that's why I did not have a definitive understanding of it, but it makes sense to me. So section 30 through 31 are about reasonable accommodations for ADA, and it looks like there's some requirements here that employers have to post certain types of notices. I think that is perfectly acceptable. Moving on to section 32, which is about breastfeeding in the workplace. And my understanding is that we have already passed this bill out of this chamber. Am I mistaken about that through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. In the past, we have had a number of bills that address breastfeeding in the workplace. This is new language that actually conforms to what has been determined on the federal level as being reasonable accommodations. In the past, our language provided that a person, we addressed the need of a person who is either breastfeeding or expressing milk to have a private place where they can do that during a break time, electricity if necessary to operate a breast pump, and refrigeration for storage. This goes beyond that, and it conforms with what's been determined on a federal level, that reasonable accommodation requires that you allow that person to have breaks outside of the regularly scheduled break time to address the particular need. So it's a further modification of the statutes we already have, but again, it does conform with what they've determined on a federal level. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that. I just know that we have seen the standalone bill show up on a potential list for bills that we might do, but I don't think it's necessary anymore if this particular item is included in the Omnibus 5003 that we're looking at. Section 33 looks to be a section having to do with the Public Health Committee. I was just reading, it says each hospital shall report biannually to the Department of Public Health in a form and manner that they require, a nurse staffing plan, and again, not being an expert on public health policy, I'm hopeful that I can get a brief description of what this does through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This is actually we do have statutory requirement around staffing committees in hospitals. In fact, there was a bill at one time in the Labor Committee on this a number of years ago, but I believe it was 3 years ago it was taken up by the Public Health Committee, and because I serve on both committees, I spent quite a bit of time working with the chairs of the committee and with the Hospital Association and the unions and the Nurses Association to develop language in statute about how staffing committees will operate within our hospitals. That's in statute currently. What this does, and I'm aware that there's been some difficulty implementing what we put into statute a few years ago, this we believe will help clarify where there might be problems by requiring quarterly reports to address when a hospital unit is out of compliance with the staffing ratios. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that description. Moving on, Section 34 appears to have to do with grants for CNA training. This sounds also like another public health item. Sections 35 through 37 are apparently about providing information to veterans on the Department of Labor website. I'm wholeheartedly in support of these few sections as well. And that brings us to Section 38, which is another contentious section that is indeed once a standalone labor bill. And this is a pretty straightforward thing. It's been presented a couple of times in the committee as nothing more than paycheck transparency, requiring employers to make sure that they provide information to their employees about what they're being paid for, et cetera. And I don't object to that. Nobody should. In fact, there should be a requirement in law, if there isn't already, and I suspect there is, that employers have to be able to provide the information that details what work someone is being paid for and at what rate and with any types of deductions, etc. But this bill goes a little bit farther because I believe that this has quite the mandate. The subsection 2 of this larger section 38 has to do with creating pay codes. It says each employer shall create a guide for pay codes for overtime and the employer's most commonly used pay differentials and a bit more. And that strikes me as a pretty significant mandate, particularly on a small business that might only have a couple of employees, which I do believe this applies to all employers. So I'd just like to confirm that, through you, Madam President, that this does in fact apply to all employers, regardless of the number of employees, and it does require them to do everything that is laid out in these sections as far as coming up with pay codes and providing all of this information to their employees. Through you.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I answer that question, I do want to acknowledge that the good chairman of the Veterans Committee has been with us all afternoon, was prepared to answer any and all questions you might have about about what we put into this bill about veterans, and it does all pertain to creating greater opportunities for our veterans to have access to employment. And there was a part of this that actually did go through the Labor Committee last year, which was to create a poster with information that could be downloaded by employers to provide more information to veterans in their workplace about the opportunities that exist. But I just wanted to acknowledge that he was here and ready, but I will move on to the next section. Thank you. So on Section 38, yes, this would be required that an employer would list what the various codes mean, and I do want to answer the good senator's question. If you look at lines 1876, it says, for the purpose of this subsection, employer means a person engaged in activity, enterprise, or business who employs 100 or more employees, including the state and any political subdivision thereof. So it would only apply to larger employers. And there was a great deal of conversation about this in committee, and one of the things that we did to modify the original bill here was to limit it to the certain number of codes that would be used, so that some employers pointed out that they had a lot of different codes, and this would only require that they provide information. I believe it's to 10 of the codes. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that information. And as I was just handing over the microphone to my colleague, I was reading the restriction on 100 or more employees. So I think that is a good provision in this, because my concern looking at this mandate, and it's still a mandate, I still wouldn't support it as a standalone entity. I do believe that employers have an obligation to their employees to provide information about their pay and benefits, and it should be detailed information. But this other stuff is a little bit more excessive in my view. And in fact, what this really does is create a situation where I think that employers are more or less required to hire a payroll company. In fact, it says in subsection 4, lines 1900 through 1903, an employer shall be deemed in compliance with these provisions if an employer has a third-party payroll service. So this section of this bill is really about making sure third-party payroll services stay in business, I guess, and less about the requirements that are allegedly to help the employee, which I'm not saying are not beneficial, but if you're going to make this argument that they're only beneficial for people that have 100 or more employees, then what about people that have less than 100 employees? At the same time, I do acknowledge that it is more of a burden on a smaller business. But this is where we should really hash these things out more, in my view, to really get to the bottom of what we're trying to achieve. And what we should be trying to achieve is a standard by which all employers should be required to provide information to their employees. That's what we should be doing. We shouldn't be trying to parse it that, well, big employers have to do this much obligation and small employers have to do this. And that, as we know, and we experience year after year after year, and as I pointed out earlier in this bill, we're going to do it for 100 employees, and next year we're going to do it for 50, or we're going to do it for 2. And to me, that's frustrating. Why don't we write the policy in a way that everyone can conform to it to begin with? And let's not make it so burdensome that it would disturb a small business from being able to comply. A simple requirement that employers are required to provide payroll information to their employees that is sufficient to document the rate of pay, hours worked, and so on, I believe would be satisfactory. And look, if there is a situation where something more is indeed required, then that would be a contractual situation that I believe is already able to be litigated civilly. That's the way we do things. When you have an employer-employee disagreement about compensation, they go to court and they fight about it. And I know that's not ideal, but this doesn't prevent that. This just creates more things to fight about. So we're not really solving anything by creating such a mandate, in my view. I also would argue that virtually every employer that has 100 employees or more is probably doing this or has a payroll service. I think really where you end up in a situation where you might not have all of that detailed information is probably in the case of a small employer. I've worked for small employers who just used to write me a check with no information on it about deductions or anything like that. And I would ask, occasionally, quarterly, or when I'm doing my taxes, can I have a full breakdown for the year on what you took out? And they were always happy to provide that. And I don't find that to be problematic. Maybe the folks that included this section do, but for me, I don't want to create additional burdens on industry that are unnecessary. Section 39, the junior firefighter grants, another positive section of this bill that would have been nice to be able to vote for as a standalone or in a package of bills that have bipartisan support. Unfortunately, wedged up against other policy that I don't agree with. Minimum wage employee definitions for Major League Baseball found its way into this omnibus bill. I mean, everyone was excited earlier this year when we heard folks from the MLB were around the building interested in making a minor change in our statutes, and I guess this is it. It is not exciting, folks. I will not bore you with the details, but that has been included. Sections 41 through 43 appear to have to do with the University of Connecticut's Special Police and Fire recruitment and retention. It's pretty straightforward. It is not complex, and I'm just going to kind of breeze by that in favor of getting to Section 44 through Section 47, which is about double utility poles. And again, labor bill, lobsters, and utility poles are part of this bill. Through you, Madam President, I'm wondering if you could ask the gentlelady to share with me the reason why we're including this language in this bill. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And before I yield to my colleague, the good Senator Duff, I do want to say that I think that this touches obviously on labor because this is work that will be done by, workers here in our state, presumably. But what is, I think most people are pretty aware of the fact that we have double poles throughout the state of Connecticut, and they can be an eyesore, but they can also make work on those poles very complicated. And I do want to yield to the good Senator Duff, who has been involved in this, in helping to craft this legislation.
Thank you. Do you accept the yield, Senator Duff?
Thank you, Madam President. Thanks to our good chair of the Labor Committee, Senator Kushner, for her work on this bill and answering questions, multiple hours on this. So yes, I'm happy to answer questions about it. This was inserted into this bill because it does impact workers in the state of Connecticut, and also at the same time working to solve a problem that has plagued this state and many other states around us for decades. This is a way in which we've come to a compromise that will be able to hopefully solve this issue in a way that is fair to our workers, but also provides results to the residents who we serve in this legislature. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that. I understand that this is something that the good senator has been personally interested in for a number of years, and I'm curious to find out what the issue really is. I kind of get the concept that sometimes you have a pole that's in a state of repair, and it takes a while for the utilities to get around to cleaning that up. And part of that is a dispute over the equipment that's on the pole and having to transfer it from one pole to the other, and who's responsible for doing that work and so forth. Maybe I could get just a brief explanation of the issue itself and how this addresses it through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, Madam President. So once I explain this to the good senator, he will then never be able to not see this issue any longer, like many of us. So through our state, and there's been news reports, we've talked about this for a very long time, very easy to Google this information and find out answers. But in a nutshell, there are utility poles. Most are either owned by the energy companies or they are owned by Frontier, which originally SNET or AT&T Frontier, now Verizon. And if there are if there is an accident, say, a car crashes into a pole, there's now a double pole situation. And in the past, and I've seen this personally in my hometown of Norwalk, where there have been double poles has sometimes sat there for a decade, meaning that the wires are not transferred to the new pole in a timely manner. There have been times where they have been, again, not only an eyesore, but also a safety issue as well, because they are sometimes propped up. They are at times held by wooden anchors or whatever they are, but they are not moved in a very timely way. And I think that is because the fact that moving these are a cost center to the companies. They're not something that is an incentive for them to do. Thankfully, we have workers in the state who are Communication Workers of America who can move these, not the electrical lines, because that's a proprietary work of the electric distribution companies, but of the non-electrical wires can do that in a way that is much faster, efficient, and rids us of the eyesore and the safety issues. So in a nutshell, Senator, that is the issue.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Just reading through this, it looks like what is being done here is the creation of a mechanism involving a utility pole custodian to step in and make this change and move the equipment from pole to pole and so forth. And that seems like an accommodation that is all revolving around what ultimately is the solution to be devised that is in section 47, which is for PURA to initiate a docket to determine the recommended language for how the liability might be handled, which is, I think, part of the main crux of what is causing the inability for these folks to get on the same page about doing it. I don't think I object to the policy now that I understand it. I just want to make sure that that's kind of the goal here, which is to create this mechanism in the interim, but then ultimately put PURA on developing a solution through you.
Thank you, Senator Duff.
Thank you, through you, Madam President. Yeah, that would be we've tried a number of different iterations on this, and kind of the pilot program that we actually voted on in this chamber has been very helpful and worked very well. But there are probably tens of thousands of these double poles around the state of Connecticut. And again, once we talk about this, you'll never unsee them again. So you'll regret the fact of asking me these questions. But we do need a better process, and we need to hold companies accountable so that there is this mechanism in place if there are these double polls and the wires aren't being transferred in a timely manner. I will say that we worked very hard over many months to craft this language and craft it in a good faith manner with the electric companies, with the cable companies, with others as well. So I think we've come to a solution that folks are generally supportive of, and that's why that ended up in this bill. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the good senator and his commentary on this subject. I feel like I have a little bit more of a handle on it. I do not consider myself an expert at this point, for sure, and I will certainly defer to my colleagues that are much more in tune with this discussion as it occurred in the Energy Committee. I do know that the vote was 19-7 out of the committee. I do, however, respect the good senator and his description of what's going on, and I do certainly recognize the problem. I do know where there's a couple double polls in my area, but I do not make a point of being keenly aware of them, and hopefully I do not become cursed with that in the future. So I'm just going to move on. My objection to those sections would simply be that they are included in this large omnibus bill, which I don't think we should have large omnibus bills to begin with. But I'll just move on and suggest that the next section to discuss is section 48, which is requiring the labor commissioner and the chief manufacturing officer, in consultation with the commissioner of Veterans Affairs, within available appropriations, to post certain benefits and services, again, for veterans. And I certainly would support that as a standalone measure. Again, I won't keep beating a dead horse, but I'm lamenting the fact that I can't vote for it as part of this larger bill. Section 49, part-time fire service instruction classification. This is probably something that would have went through public safety or maybe even GAE. I don't know, but I don't remember seeing it. Section 50, this is a study. Very clearly it says right in the first paragraph, comptroller shall conduct a study of health insurance coverage for retired police officers and firefighters in the state. It's a contentious issue, no doubt, what is going on with the benefits, retirement benefits for municipal first responders. But this looks like a study to look at that issue. Moving on to section 51, this is about paraeducator reasonable assurance. And this is an interesting topic that I'd like to understand a little bit better. Through you, Madam President, can I get the gentlelady to describe this section 51 to us?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a bill that did come through the Labor Committee. What this will require is that the Board of Ed provide notice to a paraeducator if they have a reasonable expectation to return to work in the fall. As you probably know, if a person has a reasonable expectation to return, then they are not eligible for unemployment benefits. And that sometimes is a very cumbersome process because a person doesn't realize until several months later that they do not have further employment. And this would require that the school district make an effort to notify them if they're not going to be returned to work, so they could begin collecting unemployment without that long delay. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Just out of curiosity, are paras currently eligible to collect unemployment if they are purposely hired for only working during the school year and not the entire year? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, if they do not have an expectation to return to work, then they would be eligible for unemployment. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Right, thank you very much, Madam President. Just moving on to section 52. This, on my notes, I have listed School Paraeducator Advisory Council. So I guess this is just adding some representation to include 5 rather than just 1 paraeducator to this negotiating group, and I think that it makes sense from this perspective. Section 53 I have listed as something I think was negotiated in the Public Safety Committee, if I'm correct. This is about state police highway pay. Maybe the good chairman can let me know what the result was of this in the committee. Did this pass out in a partisan, or was it a unanimous vote through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you. I will yield to the good chair of the Public Safety Committee to respond to that question.
Thank you. Do you accept the yield, Senator Gaston?
I enthusiastically accept the yield, Madam President. Madam President, I believe this came out of the Public Safety Committee with unanimous support on a very bipartisan basis through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. I am going to just leave that alone. I know some of my other colleagues may speak on this bill. They might have additional questions, but knowing that it came out of public safety unanimously allows me to just continue on. So we've got, let me see, I'm on section 54, which appears to be a requirement for employers to provide information about their prevailing wage payments to create a log. And it's a substantive amount of pages here, but I don't know that there is a lot to the actual change in the bill. I'm noticing in lines 2609 through the end of section 54, the requirements that are put here and the penalty that is associated with it. Can the good chairman of the Labor Committee explain the purpose of this requirement? Other than the obvious, is there a reason why we're expanding these requirements for logs through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Madam President, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last word of that question. Your voice kind of dipped down there.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I was asking why we've increased the requirement for these logs.
That's what I didn't hear. Thank you, Madam President. This is a bill that went through the Labor and Public Employees Committee, and one of the real thinking behind this is that it's really important that we have daily logs of who's on these construction jobs, and it really comes from a concern that when there have been accidents in the past, unfortunately sometimes tragic accidents, it's been very difficult to know who was actually on that job. And so we believe this is a matter of health and safety, and will actually, it's not a difficult thing to do, and every contractor and subcontractor on a job should know who's actually on the work site on a given day. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I am fearful that I am not doing full justice to some of the sections of this bill just because it is so extensive. And I just would encourage everyone to remember that almost every one of these individual sections, and there are 75 sections, and I will grant that there's a couple of them that might take up 2 sections, but these were all standalone bills. So while I've been standing here a long time, and so has my colleague, we're not debating one bill. We're debating 25 bills, maybe more, I don't know. I didn't sit down and determine the exact number of individual items that came from the various committees that made its way into this one omnibus package. I can tell you that I'm going to share some of my commentary on social media and other places about what's going on here, where we've packaged this all together, and I'm going to predict that my constituents are going to be up in arms. They're going to be like, what are you talking about? How is that possible? Why would they do that? And it's a frustration. And one of the frustrations is that this mere section 54, while on its surface doesn't sound like too much of a significant change in the statute, may in fact be a significant burden on certain employers and may create the potential for certain problems, particularly because the penalties exist. And those penalties may be significant. Maybe the mere existence of the penalty may lead to the future work of this particular contractor being impacted. There's a lot more to get into on each one of these sections. And when we're doing them one at a time, we can do that. We can have a lot of conversation and we can dig in and we can find out more about what's happening. But we're being limited in that ability because there's just not enough time to do it. And I understand the frustration that the majority has. They want to see their bills move. My obligation is to my constituents and making sure that what comes through here is vetted properly, that we've looked at it, we've understood it, and at the very least, if it's objectionable, we've cast a no vote to mark it for eternity, that at least somebody said we shouldn't be doing this. And I would also remind people that, the status quo is no. Everything that's happening that is a yes vote is a change to what's going on in the world. So if you're not frustrated with what's going on in the world in any of these areas, I would suggest a pause before we start making significant changes. So let's move on to sections 55 and 56, which this is another area that I do disagree with, that I want to spend a little bit of time on, and that is the notion of contractor wage liability. And I believe section 55 is just the definitions. No, it actually gets to it. But section 56 is really the meat of the concern, but they are connected because we have to have these definitions to understand what's happening. But what is going on here is that we are going to change the understanding of the average person when it comes to what is common sense in a contract negotiation. Typically, if I hire somebody to do a job for me and I don't pay them, I'm responsible, right? In this bill, not only would I be responsible, but the guy that hired me is responsible too, even if he's got no idea about the people I hired. Do I have that right through you, Madam President, that that's what this bill does, or this 55 and 56?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President, and I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to the good senator that I would characterize this bill very differently. This is a bill that will require contractors to assume responsibility for the subcontractors and the subcontractors that they hire. And I do want to point out that this is something that is already required on a construction project when it's a public works project. And in fact, I think that's good practice. And unfortunately, we've had way too much wage theft in the construction industry occur. And this will help us correct that and make sure that not only are workers getting paid correctly, but also that the state of Connecticut is getting all of the both taxes and all the payments for workers' compensation and everything that we rely upon on projects. Additionally, I want to point out that this is something I think that will really, really benefit the good contractors who are operating in our state. And there are many, many good contractors. And unfortunately, when they're bidding out a job and they're hiring reputable subcontractors and subcontractors, they're actually bidding sometimes against some of the bad actors who will low bid because they know they're going to cheat the system and not pay all the workers or not pay the workers the appropriate amount of money. So this is something that I think really does benefit the good, and there are many good players in the construction industry, contractors that do abide by the law, and they are, they take all the necessary steps to be in conformance with our statutes. So this is a bill that really is addressing wage theft and a very effective way to make sure that contractors are hiring workers, paying them subcontractors that will pay their workers in accordance with our labor statutes. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Kushner. Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the good chairman's description, which I didn't find was inaccurate in its initial summation, although I think the notion that this is somehow a solution to wage theft is inappropriate. And I think it puts the mischaracterization of who's actually doing the theft into play, because the fact of the matter is that the contractor themselves is not the one doing the wage theft. It is the subcontractor that is engaged in wage theft in the scenario described. And in my world, we punish the person who's actually responsible. We do not punish an innocent third party when someone else engages in wrongdoing, and that's exactly what this bill does. And I don't know why, for the life of me, we are not actually attacking the problem, which is that if you engage in wage theft, we have to make you responsible, and we've got to protect the employees that are impacted and find a way to make them whole. I understand what's going on here, which is that the pockets are involved. Who's got the deep pockets? And that is, let's go to the general contractor, who has no control over the hiring of the subcontractor's employees, to make them whole. But it's just not fair to them. I don't understand why we would think that punishing an innocent party is somehow a solution to a problem. So, I mean, through you, Madam President, how can a contractor be responsible for wages they didn't pay? Through you.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. When a contractor, a general contractor, takes on a job, they obviously make a bid on that job, and they determine which subcontractors they're going to hire, and those subcontractors make bids that the contractor knows in advance and determines which subcontractor he's going to use for a job. And I'm told by people who work in this industry that the costs, the types of bids they get are generally very close. There isn't any great disparity between the bids because the costs are pretty standardized for a particular type of job. When somebody comes in really low, then you do have to start to wonder, well, are they saving all that money because they're going to not pay their employees correctly? And I've heard that this is where the source of the problem comes in. It provides an opportunity for the contractor to come in lower when they hire a subcontractor like that. We do believe, I've talked to a lot of people in this industry who believe that this is going to make a difference because now the contractors will have to have some responsibility of making sure they're hiring reputable subcontractors. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The question I had asked is, how are we making one party, the general contractor, responsible for wages that they were not responsible for paying? And I didn't hear an answer to that. I heard another argument in favor of how this fights wage theft that is based on an example where there is someone trying to commit the act of stealing their employees' wages by misleading them and the contractor. So, I mean, again, the solution is some bad guy is going to lie to his own employees and to the contractor, and what are we going to do to solve the problem? We're going to make the contractor pay. This is the problem I have with this legislation. I also believe that in the process here, what you're doing is creating an artificial mechanism that is going to make the cost of these contracts rise because these contractors are going to have to find a way to protect themselves now for their enhanced liability created by this legislation. What we should be doing is finding a way to penalize the actual wrongdoer, the subcontractor in this scenario that is failing to pay the wages that they are obligated to pay. What authority does a contractor have over the subcontractor's payroll practices anyway? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. If you could reframe.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We're talking about the contractor and the subcontractor. I understand this bill could get a little more complicated than all that, but for our purposes, You have a contractor who hires a subcontractor, who hires an employee. That employee is unpaid at the end of the day. The subcontractor failed to pay them. This bill makes the contractor who had hired the subcontractor responsible, even though they're not the person that hired the employee and they are not obligated to make those payments. And in fact, the whole point of the notion of having subcontractors and contractors is for that reason. Otherwise, you'd have one contractor who hired all the employees, and then they'd be responsible to pay all those employees, right? So I'm just curious, since you're making the contractor responsible for what goes unpaid by the subcontractor, what control does the contractor have over the payroll practices of that subcontractor?
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't believe this is really about what control the contractor has over the payroll practices of the subcontractor, but when a subcontractor fails to pay its employees, then typically what happens is the employees report that failure to pay, and there's an investigation and a determination. And in that case, where a subcontractor, they would be required to pay properly. But what has happened often in this industry is the subcontractors disappear and you can't find them, and they don't pay their workers. And in those instances, if a contractor becomes responsible for that, and as I said at the outset of this discussion, this is the practice, this is the law, this is the requirement on public works projects. And now we are saying that this should be extended to the private sector because it does work. It does help to make sure that people are going to get paid. And it does put a responsibility, and that's why we talk about it as the responsibility of the contractor to ensure that the subcontractors that they hire are paying their workers. So I hope I answered your question through you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. My question was, what control does a contractor have over the payroll that the subcontractor has with his employees? And the answer is none. That's the answer to the question. They don't have any control. If I'm a contractor, I hire a subcontractor, I'm paying the subcontractor. My assumption is that he's going to properly pay his employees, but I don't have any way of knowing that. I can't see inside of there. And it's also not my responsibility until this bill becomes law. And that's what this bill is designed to do, is to shift that wrongdoing, evil onto somebody who has no part in it, who's actually done their job. Is there any allowance made for the fact that the contractor made full payment to the subcontractor before we make the contractor also liable to the subcontractor's employees through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I think if you look at lines 2679, you'll see that there is in this legislation provision that nothing prohibits a contractor from including in their contract with the subcontractor a provision establishing a remedy for any liability. I think these are called retainage, and it's common in this field to have retainage so that, in fact, they are holding back a certain amount of that payment that would be due to the subcontractor, and it can be used. It's not required that it be used for this purpose, but this provision allows that it could be used to make up for those lost wages. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I do appreciate the language for clawbacks and retainage, and I do understand that. And I do understand that those are very common, particularly in public works projects, as was already mentioned. But the one thing that my colleague is not mentioning when she keeps repeating that the public works projects, it works there, we use it all the time, is that public works projects cost substantially more than private sector projects that are similar. And there's a reason for that. There's all sorts of requirements on those contractors, including what we're referring to here today. So if what is going to happen as a result of this policy is that contractors, in an effort to protect themselves, are either going to consolidate, which means that subcontractors will lose opportunities, even if they're good subcontractors, even if they're honest subcontractors, even if they're contractors that would pay their employees, they're going to lose opportunities because either A, contractors are not going to trust that they're going to pay their employees because they do not want to be on the hook for that liability, or B, the subcontractor is not going to be able to do the job because the contractor is going to require so much significant retainage, that is money that they are not paying out yet for the job, that the subcontractor can't even take on the job. And all of this creates one result at the end of the day. And the result at the end of the day is this is going to make every job cost more. It's also going to mean that there are less opportunities for contractors generally. There will be consolidation in the industry and a significant increase in costs for every project that is completed. And I am so sympathetic to the arguments that keep being made by my colleague here about wage theft and employees deserving to get paid. I agree. But paying making the contractor, who's not guilty of anything, they paid the subcontractor. Making them guilty, making them responsible for something they didn't do is not the answer. It is not the answer. And if the state of Connecticut and the Department of Labor or whoever else is involved in the enforcement of this type of situation can't handle this, then we've got to improve that. That's what we have to do. We have to improve enforcement on the subcontractor level for these employees. The answer is not to go and make an innocent party guilty. Madam President, I have an amendment. Forgive me for digging. I skipped over a few, which should make everybody happy. Okay, this is LCO 5550. I ask the clerk to please call this amendment, and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 5550, Senate Amendment E.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a very straightforward amendment. In this giant omnibus 75-section bill that's got everything from lobsters to cranes in it, some of the labor policy that's in here is very good, and some of it is very bad. And two of the sections that are very bad are sections 55 and 56. As I just described, what they do is they make someone who is innocent responsible for someone else who is guilty. That's bad no matter what the circumstances are, and we should come up with a better way to make people whole. I'm as concerned about wage theft as anybody else in this room. I want to see the people that are engaging in it penalized. I want them to not be able to participate in the industry, for crying out loud, if you commit an act like that. But trying to make the contractor responsible when he's already paid the subcontractor, that's an absurdity in my mind. And as a result, I would like this amendment to advance, which would very simply strike sections 55 and 56, which are the two sections having to do with contractor wage liability. I move adoption. I'd like a roll call vote.
We will have a roll call vote, and the question is on adoption. Will you remark, Senator Kushner?
Thank you, Madam President. I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, we will open the voting machine. Mr. Clerk, kindly announce the vote.
An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment E. This is not the bill. We are voting on the amendment. This is Senate Amendment E for House Bill number 5003. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment E. This is not the bill. This is House Bill number 5003 as amended, an act concerning workforce development and working conditions in the state.
the senators voted. The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, please give us the tally on the amendments.
Senate Amendment E, House Bill 5003, total number voting 36, total voting yea 12, total voting nay 24, absent not voting 0.
Amendment fails. Senator Sampson, back to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the recognition. Once again, disappointed that on a more or less, although not entirely partisan line, did the amendment fail. And that's disappointing because the policy that is being debated in sections 55 and 56 to me is a miss when it comes to the stated argument for why it exists. And the stated argument is that we have folks working in the state as subcontractors and employees of subcontractors that are ultimately being harmed because they are not being paid for work that they've performed. Let's solve it. Let's come up with a solution. Let's empower the Department of Labor. Let's create more wage and hour inspectors, whatever has to happen for us to start enforcing this situation so that that kind of thing doesn't continue. I am 100% in support of, but I am not in support of taking and applying the guilt and the liability of some bad actor to an innocent party. And that's what that does in the two sections that I attempted to remove from this bill. And as a result, I've got to continue suggesting that this is not a good bill that is worth voting for, even though it does contain a number of excellent provisions. The bad provisions are significantly bad, and they outweigh those good provisions. So just moving on, sections 57 through 61 are about a number of things. Internship quality standards, a tax credit study. 62 is a property tax abatement for fallen first responder domestic partners. This is another one of those sections honoring people that have sacrificed in the line of duty for the people of Connecticut. I would have liked to support that one as a standalone bill. Section 63, Volunteer Firefighter Tax Incentive Working Group. This is about creating a tax incentive for volunteer firefighters. Sounds like a good idea. And then we get to another tricky section, and that is section 64. We've already talked about, remember this is a labor bill, folks, but we've talked about cranes and utility poles, and now we're going to talk about lobsters. Yep. I love a good lobster roll as much as the next guy. But I do think that we have an obligation to the people in the state of Connecticut to have sensible policy about the restrictions for harvesting lobsters. And I believe that this section undermines that sensible policy in a grand way. And grand, I don't mean good, I just mean big. Through you, Madam President, can the good chairman of the Labor Committee instruct me on this section of the bill 64 about lobster sales, which clearly did not go through the Labor Committee. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President, and I will yield to the good chair of the Environment Committee, my friend and Senator Lopes.
Senator Lopes, do you accept the yield, sir?
I do, Madam President. And just want to reiterate to the good senator, can you please specify the question?
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
I will re-ask the question. I didn't hear exactly what he said. Can I please specify?
Rephrase the question, sir.
Understood. Thank you very much, Madam President. The question is simply provide me an understanding of what Section 64 does. I've read through it a couple of times, but not being on the Environment Committee, not being a lobster fisherman, not being a restaurateur. I don't know how all of this affects what's going on in the world, and I would like to. Through you.
Thank you. Senator Lopes.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll start off with this. This bill did receive a full hearing in the Environment Committee, and it was deliberated, voted out of the committee favorably. And I am also not a lobsterman. For all the lobstermen in New Britain, Connecticut, I don't hear a lot from them. But in essence, the lobster haul in Connecticut waters, or non-restricted Connecticut waters, are smaller than in other Northeast states. So the lobsters we have to catch in Connecticut are larger than the lobsters caught in the remaining northeastern states. This would bring us in parity with those other states, which would theoretically help the restaurant industry get lobsters more affordably and bring down the prices of lobster for these restaurants in our state.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me just digest what I just heard and kind of connect it to what I am getting from reading the underlying bill to see if I'm understanding this properly, which is that Connecticut has, like probably other states do, a size rule on the size of lobsters that can be harvested by Connecticut fishermen off the shores of Connecticut. And what this bill would allow is for restaurants to purchase lobsters that do not meet that requirement from outside the state and sell them in their restaurants. Is that correct through you?
Thank you, Senator Lopes.
Thank you, Madam President. That is correct. The difference between Connecticut and other states is 1/16 of an inch.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. I'm going to resist any kind of attempted humor, adjusting the importance of a 1/16 of an inch. But let me just suggest that I can tell from the reaction that we've gotten from this section of the bill in just the last 24 or so hours that it's been publicly known that this Section 64 having to do with an environment policy about the size of lobsters and made it into this Omnibus bill, that there's people that are definitely concerned about it. And maybe it's a 1/16 of an inch, which doesn't strike me as a lot, but it sounds like it's an awful lot to the people that are impacted. And I can understand what the concern is really, which is that if there is a size restriction within the state of Connecticut, the purpose of that is to prevent undersized lobsters from being harvested and sold in Connecticut. And if other states are allowing things that are not allowed in Connecticut, if those are now allowed to be imported into the state of Connecticut, that obviously undermines the fishermen who are operating under the Connecticut law. So for me, I don't care one way or the other about the restrictions. What I care about is putting our own lobster fishermen in the state of Connecticut at a disadvantage to out-of-state competitors because they cannot achieve the same ends based on the environmental factors of what's available off the shores of Connecticut and the fact that they have to comply with a law that their competitors are not. So I don't want to spend a lot of time debating this section because I know I have a colleague who is very invested in this section, and I have no doubt that Senator Summers will join us to enlighten us about all of the ramifications of this section shortly. But I do want to express my concern as well because I am just beginning to understand what's going on. And this is a question of why we're putting certain regulations that prevent our own fishermen in our own state from being able to compete with folks that are going to bring in lobsters from out of state. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and as a result, I wouldn't support that section. Just moving on, Section 65 is about first responder recruitment benefits. That goes through Section 72, public safety recruitment 73, the police and firefighter career pipeline plan 74, and 75. That brings us to the repealer at the end of the bill, and we have completed these 75 sections in record time. In record time, I believe we have achieved success. I want to just state as a closing argument, once again, that there are parts of this bill that I like very much. And I am extremely upset that I am going to cast a no vote that encompasses the good parts of this bill along with the bad parts of this bill. And I'm upset about that for a number of reasons. I'm pleased that those items will ultimately pass and become law more than likely. But the fact is that I will have cast a no vote against them, and my political opponents will likely use that against me in the election that's about to happen. And maybe that's part of the design of this bill, which would be an extreme frustration for me, and I think it would be a huge overreach and abuse of our system if that were to occur. And I'll certainly speak up if I see it. But the parts of this bill that are bad are really, really bad. I offered several amendments, and they were focused on repealing the dangerous and toxic sections of this bill. And I just want to revisit them very clearly and very briefly. Section 2 about wage transparency, we went through a whole conversation which pointed out the fact that people are different and they should be treated that way. And the majority's desire to put regulations on industry doesn't change the fact that the best solution when it comes to an employer and an employee coming together and working together through the hiring practice is the freedom of the parties to negotiate the terms. And that requiring these posted pay range disclosures and so forth is only going to lead to confusion. It's going to lead to expectations that are not met, and ultimately probably lead to litigation and make a bunch of trial lawyers wealthy, and ultimately not lead to anyone getting a better job or a higher paying job or any of that. That's a bad section. It should not be advanced. Section 4, employment promissory notes. As I described earlier, this is a section that would prohibit the practice of people being able to take an advance in training, in education, in equipment when they take a job. And I'll use the example of someone that goes to work as a apprentice in some industry, or they go to work for a machine shop or something like that. And the employer has got to make an investment in this employee because they're new, they're inexperienced, they need to be properly trained, and sometimes that requires education. Maybe that requires even sending them to college. Who knows? But what is the problem, I asked the majority and didn't get a viable answer, with allowing this freedom for an employer to offer an employee something that will benefit them in their future life experience and maybe give them a career in exchange for suggesting that you've got to stay employed with us or you're going to have to pay it back. People who are going to offer these opportunities, and that's what they are, their opportunities, are not going to offer them anymore. That's the result of this section of the bill. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy. It shouldn't happen. The portal-to-portal language I tried to change to make it so that it was uniform and made sense that we're offering workers' compensation coverage to valuable employees of the state, but we're offering it when it's appropriate and not when it's not appropriate. We talked about teacher terminations. We talked about service contractor worker retention. This is the section of the bill that says that if you buy a business, you have to keep the employees. It's absurd. If I buy a business, guess what? It's mine. I should be able to decide who works for me. I shouldn't be told by the Senate Democrats that I have to hire a certain group of people. I should be able to decide who I'm going to hire on my own. And of course, in the real world, that's what happens. When people buy a business, they very often open the door to allow the existing workers to apply to become part of the team. But to suggest that because you buy a business, you are also buying the obligations of the previous employees, even if those previous employees or the staff structure or the way that company was run was the reason why they ended up not being successful and had to sell it to you, it's nuts. The idea that this body would think that they even have the right to dictate to free citizens that companies have to hire anyone is absurd. That should be a decision that's made by those people and those people alone. I'm looking over some of this stuff that I'm very frustrated to vote no against. The Fallen Hero Fund, for example. We talked about cranes. Paycheck transparency. Another section that I don't think actually does what they intend. This is only going to be effectively a requirement to make companies buy into a payroll service, which will ultimately eat into their ability to pay their employees. And then finally, the contractor wage liability, which we just visited in the last few minutes, so I won't go too crazy other than to suggest that this is a situation where we have a real problem in this state, and it's called wage theft, where certain employees of subcontractors are not being paid, and now the solution the majority has come up with is we're going to make the actual contractor responsible. The contractor who's already paid the subcontractor, who did everything right, the majority feels like we should punish that guy. We should make that guy responsible for something somebody else did. And I just don't live in that world. I live in the world of personal responsibility, where if you're the person who makes the problem, if you're the person who's guilty of the evil deed or the wrongful act, then you pay the penalty. You're the one who's responsible. And unfortunately, that's not the way this policy reads. This policy reads that we're going to make the innocent party who did the right thing responsible. And that's wrong. 75 sections. 75 sections of unrelated policy that came through a multitude of committees. Probably not all inclusive, but environment, lobsters, public safety. I think we heard public health bills, and probably more. This is not the way our legislature should operate. We should be voting on these bills the same way they left the committee, one by one topic at a time, so everybody can understand and everybody can have the ability to vote up or down on each policy item, not have them all jam-packed into a giant smorgasbord sandwich, which is what we got. Over 100 pages, 75 sections of unrelated policy, good, in fact, great policy, and bad and even toxic policy, running the gamut A to Z, 1 out of 10 and 10 out of 10 policy, all in the same document, and I've got to make one vote? It's not fair. It's inappropriate. And I did my best to carve it up. I did my best to offer amendments to take out the sections that I thought ought to be voted on separately. The majority doesn't care, though. They simply want to put this in front of me for an up or down vote. That is not just disrespecting the members of the minority that deserve the opportunity to cast their votes on these individual bills. It's also disrespectful to the majority members that should have the right to do the same thing. And it's most disrespectful to the people we represent back home, because that is not what their expectation of what we're doing is. Their expectation is that we're actually up here working together to make good policy for the people of Connecticut, and that we're thoughtful about it, we're respectful about it, and we include them in the process. None of those things are true, Madam President. This is the majority using their ability and the fact that they're in an extreme majority to get away with the fact that they can put together and assemble this giant document with very little notice and put it in front of us for an up or down vote. Well, my up or down vote is down, Madam President. Thank you.